This is now my third time, second time speaking. I was talking again yesterday. I don't know how many people do know I'm a retired police officer from the UK. I spoke last time calling out my colleagues, everybody in uniform, who actually right now should know better. If you don't know better, take the uniform off and go home.
Yep.
And if you do know better, why aren't you following your oath and doing your job? I've investigated a lot of crimes in my life. I've investigated crimes since I retired from the police. And I have to say, this COVID crime that we're all experiencing right now is just about the easiest crime I've ever seen to investigate. I've never, ever seen a situation where the criminals put all the evidence in front of everybody daily on the screen and talk about it.
No kidding.
What we need to do is go back to, everybody is doing right now what I call chasing the ball. We're talking about what's happening today. We're talking about what happened yesterday. But to really understand what's going on here, every single police officer out there, and I'm calling on every single chief of police and every single senior police officer to actually take a look at how this all started. Let's just go back to, in Alberta, March, and actually look at how did this all start. It started with a panic, and somebody, an unelected official, came out of their office and said, everybody panic. Anybody over 250 in a group, you have to go away, and you go home. That shut down West Edmonton Mall, car dealerships, businesses all over the province. And Kenny, if you don't think that's a lockdown, then you need to get some help. All the care homes were shut. The first lockdown my wife talked about wasn't actually caused by any infections, wasn't caused by any outbreaks. It was just a matter of fact of, from this point on, until we tell you otherwise, you will not leave the centre. You will not see people. You will look at people through smoke glass windows, if you are lucky. And that happened for 2.5 months. If that's not a crime, then I should never have been in the police. All of this was caused by our wonderful cases, and everything you see today is caused by these wonderful cases. Let's not get into the efficacy of what an actual case is, but let's use the numbers. If I was prosecuting a crime, I'd look at the evidence I have in front of me every single day. We can dig into whether these cases are real and how much that efficacy is, but let's just use the numbers that Alberta Health and Canada Health publishes every single day. So on the day that Dina Hinshaw decided that we should lock down the province, was the 12th of March. On that day, we count cases across the world in cases per 100,000 people, because otherwise the numbers get too big. So for the typical flu season, we have cases in between 179 and 215 cases per 100,000. Now that's using lab-tested, hospitalized influenza patients using a test that's been around for decades. It's a gold standard test. So the reality is those numbers are underestimated, not overestimated. So 179 to 215 flu cases, never called emergency, never has a medical officer come out of their office and said everybody needs to panic. On the day that we actually locked down this province, we had 0.4 cases of COVID. 0.4. On the strength of that, and the panic for what was coming, we had talk of hydroxychloroquine. Yes, I used the H word. And I'm going to use it because in Alberta, you may not know, but we actually very early on decided we needed to find out whether this drug would work. We still don't know in this province whether it would work. We can know. All we have to do is actually go and look at all the studies that go back decades for any influenza-like illness. But let's just talk about the study we have in Alberta. And ironically, that study was called the Alberta Hope Study, out of the University of Calgary. I won't go into the details of how poorly that study was set up. It was almost designed for people to die. But let's talk about what we did with that study. So the 1st of April, obviously picked for the day itself, because it was an April Fool. We decided that we would start a study on hydroxychloroquine. So we could decide whether we had a treatment, so we wouldn't need vaccines, we wouldn't need lockdowns, we could actually treat people and save lives. That study was supposed to go on. It was cancelled, actually it was put on hold, on the 22nd of May. Now from the 1st of April to the 22nd of May, we didn't really get anywhere. There were a couple of updates on the site. They were recruiting people. But on the 22nd of May, The Lancet pulled out a classic example of the worst research I've ever seen in my life. So much so that The Lancet, for almost the first time in its history, had to retract that study. They retracted that study on the 4th of June. Now, on the 4th of June, if you went on the Alberta website for the Hope study, you would see that they were still recruiting and still working on the study. On the 22nd of May, they were still working and running that study. On the 4th of June, when the study was retracted, they were still working on and recruiting for the study. On the 17th of June, 13 days after the study was retracted, they actually published that the study was being put on hold because the Hope study was being put on hold because it had been cancelled because of the Lancet study. So 13 days after the Lancet study had been retracted, we called a cancellation to Hope. How does that make any sense? Then on the 27th of July, I called out, and many people called out, Dina Hinshaw and others, and said we literally have no hope in Alberta. The study is on hold based on an article that has been retracted for 2 months. Why do we not have any study on this drug so we can get on with our lives? 3 days after that, they updated that website and said, no, now we're putting this study on hold because we don't have enough cases. Hang on a minute. If we don't have enough cases, why are we all stuck in our houses? If you go on the website today and look up the Alberta Hope study, it will tell you that it was initially put on hold on the 22nd of May, and then on the 17th of June it was updated because we don't have enough cases. So let's get back to cases again using Alberta Health's and Canada Health's own numbers. So the day that the study was started on the 1st of April, we had 13 cases per 100,000 in the province. Very small amount, but obviously enough for them to start a study. On the 22nd of May, when they decided to halt the study from the Lancet journal, we had 18 cases per 100,000. So again, they're growing a bit, but we had a different reason to stop it. On the 17th of June, when they put a halt to the Hope in Alberta, because we didn't have enough cases, we had 31 cases per 100,000, more than 2 times the amount of cases that were good enough to start the study. But now they're not good enough to continue the study. Our cases per 100,000 have averaged, since we started this, at 21. Since the 17th of June, our cases per 100,000 haven't dropped below 23. So why can we start a study for a drug that may save everybody's life with 13 cases per 100,000, but at 31 we can't? So again, I speak out to all my colleagues around the world. This is not a unique story in Alberta. It's happening everywhere, and it's happened everywhere. If I was still serving, I'd be arresting people right now. And I'd be arresting people for the protection of the people of Alberta. I'd be arresting these people for the protection of everybody in the world. If you don't do something soon, then you are in neglect of your duty, your sworn duty to protect the citizens of that you are serving every single day, instead of turning a blind eye and sullying the uniform that you're supposed to be wearing. If you don't do something soon, then for God's sake, take the uniform off and have some respect, for Christ's sake. This is a crime that has all the evidence in open sight. It is the crime that is the easiest to investigate. I've been investigating it since December. Most of my research is up online, and it's all backed by facts that the government themselves have put out. We don't need to go interviewing people, trying to find facts. It's all there in plain sight. So again, one last time. And you know what? If the police and the sheriffs and the rest of law enforcement and Alberta Justice sitting across there in your little ivory tower, where I've sat many occasions and discussed things about this province and how justice should be done. It's time prosecutors got off their backside. It is time the police got off their backside. And if you don't, then guess what? At some point, the people will. It is time for you to do your job.
What's Brenda Lucky doing right now?
Last time I came up here, it was really, I got on a bit of a rant, but I was only up here to answer some questions. So I suppose, has anybody got any questions?
What's going to happen now? What are we going to do?
Okay, so the
Action time! Action time! Action time!
Action time! Action time! Action time! We gotta stop preaching to the converted, and we need to start preaching to the people that are not paying attention.
Okay, so somebody's just asked something that, ironically, I just wrote an article on. Winter is coming. What happens in winter? We all get flu. You heard me talk about at the beginning of this, the flu cases per 100,000. That's based on people who are sick enough to go to hospital. Anybody who's got children in school right now will have heard of some child who's had a cough or a sniffle, which under normal circumstances nobody would have thought twice about. But today it is nothing other than COVID, because nothing else exists other than COVID. I've just been asked, what do we do now? You know, how can they continue this without their asymptomatic testing? Because they won't have the numbers. Guess what? They're going to have the numbers, and they're going to have really big numbers soon. Imagine going through last flu season before COVID existed, and every single person you knew, think back to November and December last year, how many people you knew who were sick with something. Now imagine if every single one of those people was diagnosed as having COVID, because right now that's what's going to happen. They don't need to test anyone. They don't need asymptomatic tests anymore. And that's why we've stopped them as we move into flu season. There is no other reason for it. It is not because they've decided they don't need to test anyone. And actually, if they didn't need to test anyone and there was no asymptomatic spread, then everybody's been unlawfully imprisoned for the last 6 months. And somebody needs to be held account. But right now, everybody needs to be aware that we are about to move into flu season. And they are going to, Dina Hinshaw is going to come on the television at one point in the next few months and tell you that 50,000 people got COVID over the weekend and that 500 people died of COVID over the weekend. Even if this virus didn't exist, she will be able to tell you that because of the protocols we have in place. COVID could never have existed on this planet, and I'm not saying it didn't, and I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying the way we have the protocols and the way they've set things up, everything is COVID. Whether you have a sniffly nose, if in Alberta, if you're in a care home and you get sad, if you have a change in mental state, you have COVID. That is a defined symptom of COVID. for somebody in a care home. Now, you've listened to all these stories today of people in care homes. You've listened to the horror stories. As a police officer, I've kicked down doors and dragged people out of buildings for doing less than is happening to these people. I've charged people for doing less than is happening to these people. And I'm just following orders doesn't stand anymore. It didn't stand at the Nuremberg trials. There's a reason it's called the Nuremberg defense. It didn't stand then and it won't stand now. But again, I've said before, and I'll say it again, there's a lot of people that are being silent, from police officers and sheriffs to doctors and nurses, healthcare workers throughout the world, to just basic professionals. We're all sitting there, to our preppers who are getting ready and waiting for the right time. Well, I don't know what you're waiting for, because the right time was March. How many people have got to die of unavoidable deaths? How many people have got to have their livelihoods ruined before you get off your backside and do something? Are you waiting for a revolution? Because if you are no better than the people over there. If what you're looking for is a revolution and bloodshed, then you're doing their work for them.
Yep.
If you want to put a stop to this and save lives, now is the time to stand up. Because if not now, when?
Amen.
It is time to be silent no more. Because silence is going to get you nothing. And eventually, as the poem says, eventually they're going to come for you. You as a doctor, a physician, a nurse, a police officer might think you're safe today. But at some point, you're not going to be useful anymore. And at that point, who's going to be left to speak out for you? Right now, we're speaking out for the elderly. We're speaking out for the children. But the reality is, we're speaking out for humanity. Because eventually, they will come for you. You will become redundant.
Explain the difference between a pandemic and a pandemic. In a pandemic, the major concern is what to do with all the dead bodies. Where are they? Is there any dead bodies? Do you see it on the headlines? What are we going to do? Grave diggers work overtime during a pandemic. Any concern of that? No, because this is a pandemic. Big difference.
So just talking to his point, using their own evidence. Again, I hope somebody's listening there over in the prosecutor's office, because you don't even have to go collect the file. It's on your own servers. So in Canada, probably people don't realize that this virus has been circulating the globe, provable, circulating the globe based on blood tests, since mid-November at the latest. So for 5 months before we locked down in Canada and implemented masks didn't start on April 1st in Edmonton. Masks have been around since the start of this, people panicking and having to wear masks. But basically, since the start of the virus circulating the globe, this highly infectious virus that's going to kill us all, and mid-March, the 23rd of March, when we pretty much shut down society, in Canada there were 8 reported deaths with COVID, not from COVID, with COVID. 8. In the next 5 months, while we did everything we possibly could to stop the spread of this virus, bearing in mind we'd done nothing for the first 5 months, in the next 5 months we had 9,500 reported deaths. So if all their numbers are right, if all their expectations are right, if all their cases and deaths are right, then they killed 9,500 people with the actions they took. And what are we doing about that? We double down every single day. We make it worse every single day. You know what? If the best that these people, Tam, Hinshaw, Bonnie Henry, all of these people across the the provinces and across the country. If the best you could do was from the first 5 months take us from 8 to the second 5 months take us to 9,500, it's time for you to step down. It's time for you to sit in a cell for a while and be isolated for all our safety. Because while you are out and about in the public and talking and making decisions, we are all unsafe. So, sorry.
Woo! Thank you, David.
I just wanted to tell you something that if anyone, and I know everyone here understands and believes and realizes what a travesty this is in so many ways. My dad was in a room by himself up until 4 days ago. Then they transferred a gentleman in who'd had an accident at work. So the gentleman was supposed to be placed in isolation. That's their protocols. So naturally, following them, they put him in my dad's room. So I'm thinking that we've coined a new term, bisolation. When I spoke to them about it, I mean, if you make the rules, then shouldn't you be following them? I was told, oh, it's okay because the nurses, we gown and mask and everything, and then we take it off before we see your dad. Of course, I'm not the least bit concerned about this gentleman giving my dad anything, but you know, obviously you don't believe in the rules because you're not following them. When I went up the other night, I was pleasantly surprised to find my dad in a wheelchair sitting beside this man watching TV. Now, staff had been in and out of that room. Well, what if this man had this deadly virus? He was going to infect my dad. It's lunacy. They don't follow the rules a lot of the time because they don't believe them.